Welcome back to the Paranormal Inc. Ohio podcast. I'm your host, Ed, and today we're kicking off a brand new series called Haunted Forest. Throughout this season, we're going to travel to some of the most mysterious and unsettling forests around the world. Places where people claim they've seen ghosts, strange creatures, unexplained lights, and things that simply defy explanation. We're starting with one of the most famous and feared wilderness regions in North America, the Appalachian Mountains. Stretching more than 2,000 miles from Alabama all the way into Canada, the Appalachian Mountains are among the oldest mountain ranges on Earth. Scientists estimate these mountains formed hundreds of millions of years ago, long before the age of the dinosaurs. Over time, countless generations of Native American tribes, early settlers, hunters, trappers, miners, and hikers have traveled these mountains, and with them came stories that have been passed down for centuries. Today, millions of people visit the Appalachian Mountains. Every year, they come to hike, camp, hunt, fish, and experience some of the most breathtaking scenery in the eastern United States. Most leave with incredible memories and a deeper appreciation for nature. But not everyone leaves with good memories. Some leave with stories they refuse to tell until years later. Others swear they encountered something they can't explain. And some people simply never come home. Now, before we continue, I want to make something clear. This episode includes documented history, religion, can't even read my own word, guys, regional folklore, and reported eyewitness experiences. Some of these stories have natural explanations, others remain unexplained. My goal isn't to convince you that every story is paranormal, but to explore why these mountains have inspired fear and mystery for generations. If you grew up anywhere in Appalachia, chances are you've heard certain warnings from parents, grandparents, or longtime locals. Don't whistle in the woods after dark. Don't wander off the trail. Don't follow strange voices. And if you ever hear your name being called from deep in the forest when no one should be there, don't answer. Those warnings might sound like campfire stories to outsiders, but in many Appalachian communities, they were taught as serious advice. Whether those warnings came from practical experience, folklore, or something people genuinely believed they encountered, they have survived for generations. The Appalachian wilderness is enormous. Thick forest covers thousands of square miles, and in many places it's possible to hike for hours without seeing another person. Dense tree-covered blocks sunlight, making the woods surprisingly dark, even during the day. Fog can roll in without warning, muffling sound and making familiar trails seem unfamiliar. It's easy to understand how someone could become disoriented. But many experienced outdoorsmen insist getting lost isn't what frightened them to the most. Hunters have reported hearing footsteps that seemed to match their own pace. Every time they stopped walking, the footsteps stopped too. When they turned around, no one was there. Campers have described hearing conversations drifting through the trees late at night, only to discover there were no nearby campsites. Others have reported seeing dark figures standing silently between the trees before disappearing the moment they looked directly at them. Could these experiences have natural explanations? Of course. Wind can carry voices over long distances. Wildlife often produces sounds that people unfamiliar with the forest might mistake for something else. Our minds naturally search for patterns in darkness, especially when we're already feeling uneasy. But that still doesn't explain everything. Again and again, people who have never met each other describe remarkably similar experiences. Feelings of being watched, hearing footsteps behind them, catching glimpses of something just beyond the reach of a flashlight. And perhaps most unsettling of all, hearing a familiar voice call their name, even though the person whose voice they recognized was nowhere nearby. Whether these stories are caused by psychology, the wilderness itself, or something none of us fully understand, one thing is certain: the Appalachian Mountains have earned their reputation as one of America's most mysterious places. And we're just getting started. In the next part of the episode, we'll dive into one of the most famous Appalachian warnings of all, why so many people refuse to whistle in the woods after dark, and the chilling stories from those who say something whistled back. One of the most fascinating things about the Appalachian Mountains isn't just the stories. It's how often the same warnings appear across different communities. Talk to people whose families have lived in the mountains for generations, and you'll hear similar advice repeated over and over again. These aren't laws or official rules. They're pieces of folklore handed down from the parents to children and grandparents to grandchildren. One of the most well-known warnings is simple: never whistle in the woods after dark. Nobody seems to agree on exactly where this warning began. Some believe it came from early settlers trying to keep children from wandering at night. Others believe it has roots in older mountain folklore. Whatever its origin, you'll still find people today who refuse to whistle once the sun goes down. Ask them why, and many will simply tell you, because something might whistle back. Now, there is no scientific evidence that anything supernatural whistles in the forest. Coyotes, owls, foxes, and other wildlife can produce sounds that surprise even experienced outdoorsmen. But that hasn't stopped the stories from getting bigger and from spreading. Some campers have claimed they heard a whistle echo back from deep within the trees after making one themselves. At first, they assumed it was another hiker. Then it happened again. The whistle sounded closer still. According to the story, the campers packed their gear and left before sunrise, convinced that whatever was answering them wasn't another person. Now, I know I say in every episode, there's no scientific fact, it's not proven, this and that. I have to say that. I do. I have to say that in these episodes. If not, I get eaten alive. In comments, you're going to hear my dog. My dogs, they love to voice their opinion. I get eaten alive in the comments, or I get emails that say, oh, you can't say that, this stuff isn't real. I believe the paranormal is real. I do. I always have. I have for years. Ever since my first encounter with the paranormal. And I have researched it and studied it for years. I've gone to multiple investigations. I've tried so many things that I believe the paranormal is real. But the only reason why I say that in these episodes is because I have to. I have to say it or someone's going to get upset. I don't want you guys to get upset. I want you guys to enjoy the episodes. So, and I like, seeing good comments, having good emails, and not, the bad ones. Which everybody's, allowed to their own opinion. Now, I know there's a lot of skeptics out there, and I know a lot of people don't believe in the paranormal, and that's okay. I'm not trying to push the paranormal on anybody. I'm not trying to say that my way is correct and your way is wrong, because that's just is. That's just how I believe in the paranormal itself. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and move on. But I just wanted to explain that to you guys, that why I always say there's no scientific proof or anything. I'm not denouncing science, because science is very real as well. So let's move on. Another common piece of Appalachian folklore tells people never to follow voices in the woods. Imagine you're hiking alone, the trail gets quiet. Then you hear someone calling your name, not yelling, just speaking calmly. It sounds familiar. Maybe it's a friend, maybe it's your spouse, maybe it's someone you haven't seen in years. You answer, but no one responds. The voice comes again, this time from a different direction. Some people who have shared stories like this later realize they had wandered well off the trail without remembering how they got there. Again, there are natural explanations. The sound can travel in strange ways through valleys and forests. Wind can distort voices. Our brains can misinterpret random sounds, especially when we're tired, isolated, and frightened. But there are reports that are harder to explain. Experienced hunters have described hearing someone walking just behind them for miles. Every step they took, another step followed. When they stopped, the footsteps stopped. When they quickly turned around, nothing. No person, no animal, no movement. Only silent woods. Some dismissed it as echoes. Others refused to return to that area ever again. Perhaps the strangest reports involve what many simply call the feeling. People who've spent years in the outdoors often describe an overwhelming sense that something is watching them. Not ordinary nervousness, not the awareness that bears or coyotes might be nearby, something different. A feeling so intense that they immediately packed their equipment and left without finishing their trip. Many experienced hikers have said they learned to trust that instinct. Whether it was their subconscious detecting danger before they consciously noticed it, or simply anxiety in an unfamiliar environment, they believed listening to the feeling may have saved their lives. There are also stories of strange lights moving silently between the trees. Unlike flashlights, these lights don't appear to belong to other hikers. Witnesses describe small glowing orbs drifting through the forest before disappearing into the darkness. Natural explanations such as fireflies, atmospheric conditions, or distant lights have been suggested in some cases. In others, no explanation has ever been confirmed. It's important to remember that stories like these are part of an Appalachian folklore and eyewitness testimonies. They aren't proof of the paranormal. But when similar accounts continue to surface decade after decade, it's easy to understand why these mountains have earned such a mysterious reputation. Because sometimes it's not what people see that terrifies them, it's what they never see at all. In the next part of our journey, we'll explore some of the Appalachian Mountains' most unsettling reports, mysterious disappearances, unexplained lights, and the stories that continue to leave both investigators and local residents searching for answers. One of the reasons the Appalachian Mountains have become so legendary isn't just because of ghost stories or local folklore. It's because every year people disappear in these mountains. Most disappearances have logical explanations. Hikers become lost, accidents happen, weather changes rapidly, and the wilderness is unforgiving. Search and rescue teams perform incredible work, and many missing people are eventually found. But not every case has an answer. There are hikers who seem to vanish without a trace. Experienced outdoorsmen who knew these mountains like the back of their hand have walked into the woods and never returned. In some cases, search crews have found abandoned campsites where food was still sitting out. Tents remained standing and personal belongings had been left behind. It's as though someone simply walked away and never came back. Those stories have fueled countless theories over the years. Some people believe dangerous terrain is responsible. Others point to wild animals. Still others wonder if there are things hiding in these forests that we've yet to understand. One of the most mysterious aspects of many missing person cases is how difficult they can be to solve. The Appalachian wilderness stretches across millions of acres. Thick forests, steep ravines, caves, streams, and changing weather can erase tracks within hours. Search teams often face impossible conditions. Yet there are cases where trained dogs suddenly lose a scent for no obvious reason. There are stories of searchers covering the same area multiple times before discovering evidence they somehow missed. Again, these events can have completely natural explanations. Weather, terrain, and human error all play significant roles in the search operations. But when families are left without answers, mystery naturally fills the silence. Then there are the stories from people who did make it home. One experienced backpacker described hiking along a remote section of a trail just before sunset alone. As darkness settled over the forest, he noticed that everything around him had become unusually quiet. No birds, no insects, no wind, just silence. At first, he welcomed the peace, and he realized something wasn't right. The forest had gone completely still. He later said it felt as though every living thing had disappeared at the same moment. Moments later, he heard a branch snap somewhere behind him. He turned. Nothing. He continued walking. Another snap. This time closer. He stopped again. Silence. The hiker later admitted he couldn't explain why, but an overwhelming feeling told him to leave immediately. He packed up his campsite, hiked through the night, and didn't stop until he reached his car. He has never returned to that section of the forest. Stories like that appear again and again throughout Appalachia. Different people, different decades, different locations, yet many describe remarkably similar experiences. An overwhelming sense of being watched. Silence replacing the normal sounds of nature, footsteps with no visible source, something moving just outside the beam of a flashlight. Could fear amplify ordinary experiences? Absolutely. Psychologists have long studied how darkness, isolation, and unfamiliar environments heighten our awareness and sometimes cause us to misinterpret sounds and movement. But not every witness believes that's what happened to them. Many insist they weren't frightened until after the strange events began. That's what keeps these stories alive. Not because they prove the paranormal, but because they leave behind questions that no one has been able to answer. As we continue our journey through the Appalachian Mountains, we're about to explore some of the most famous unexplained phenomena associated with these ancient forests. Mysterious lights drifting through the darkness, ghostly encounters reported for generations, and legends that refuse to fade no matter how much time passes. These stories are next. The Appalachian Mountains have always been a place where reality and legends seem to exist side by side. For centuries, people have walked these forests and returned with stories of strange lights in the distance, voices coming from empty places, and encounters with things they couldn't explain. Some of these stories became famous around the world. Others were only whispered about between neighbors sitting on the front porches, passed down from one generation to the next. But almost all of them share one thing in common. They happened in the woods, deep in the woods. One of the most famous mysteries connected to Appalachia is known as the Brown Mountain Lights. Located in North Carolina's Blue Ridge Mountains, Brown Mountain has been the center of explained reports for more than a century. People have described seeing glowing lights hovering above the mountain ridge, moving slowly through the darkness before disappearing. Some witnesses say the lights appear as small glowing orbs. Others describe them as large flashes that seem to move against the wind. The first widely known reports date back more than 100 years, but local legends surrounding strange lights in the area go back much further. Over the years, scientists and researchers have studied the phenomenon and suggested possible explanations, including distant vehicle lights, atmospheric conditions, reflections, and other natural causes. Some sightings have likely been explained, but some witnesses still believe they've seen something that doesn't fit any ordinary explanation. For them, the question remains: what are people really seeing above Brown Mountain? The strange lights aren't the only mystery hidden among the Appalachian trees. There are countless stories of people encountering figures standing silently in the forest. Sometimes they appear as shadows, sometimes as human-like shapes, and sometimes witnesses describe seeing someone who seems completely out of place. An old man standing beside an abandoned trail, a person wearing clothing from another time period, a figure appearing between the trees before vanishing moments later. Many of these stories come from the areas with deep histories, old mining communities, abandoned settlements, and battlefields where people lost their lives. The Appalachian region has witnessed wars, disasters, mining accidents, and countless tragedies. Some believe those events left behind something more than history. They believe the land remembers. One common type of Appalachian ghost story involves phantom footsteps. A person walking alone through the woods hears someone approaching behind them. At first, they assume another hiker is nearby. The footsteps continue, slow, steady. Getting closer, they turn around, and nobody is there. Some witnesses say that the footsteps continue even after they stop moving. Others claim they hear someone walking around their campsite late at night, circling their tent. When morning comes, there are no footprints. No signs that anyone was there. Just a memory of the sound. Another chilling part of Appalachian folklore involves what some people call the Watchers. These are stories of people who feel like something is observing them from the tree line. A pair of eyes reflecting in the darkness, a shape standing motionless between the trees. something that disappears the moment you look directly at it. Wildlife can easily create frightening encounters in the forest, a deer standing still in the shadows, a predator watching from a distance, or even the reflection of light can appear unnatural in the darkness. Some witnesses insist what they saw looked almost human, and that it was disturbed. Perhaps the most unsettling thing about these mountains is how many stories contain the same message. The forest is beautiful, but it demands respect. People who live near these mountains understand something visitors sometimes forget. The woods are not a theme park. They're ancient. They're vast. And they can be unforgiving. Whether the stories come from misunderstood sounds, the power of human imagination, or something beyond our understanding, Appalachia has created a mystery that refuses to disappear. Because when you stand beneath those ancient trees, surrounded by darkness, you realize something. You are not the only thing in the forest. In the final part, our journey through the Appalachian Mountains will explore some of the darkest legends connected to these woods, including creatures said to roam the forest, the stories of things that imitate human voices, and why some locals believe there are places in Appalachia where you better off not going. The Appalachian Mountains have always carried stories of things that don't belong. Stories of voices with no owners, footsteps with no footprints, lights that appear where no lights should be. But perhaps the most unsettling stories from these ancient forests are the ones about what some people believe may be living among the trees. For generations, Appalachian communities have shared legends of strange creatures and unexplained encounters. Some of these stories come from old folklore, while others come from modern eyewitnesses. Reports from hikers, hunters, and people who spend their lives in the wilderness. And one name appears again and again: the wild man of the woods. Long before modern cryptid stories became popular, many cultures around the world had legends of mysterious human-like creatures living in the wilderness. In Appalachia, stories of wild, unknown beings have existed for generations. People described hearing strange cries coming from the deep in the mountains. They spoke of heavy footsteps moving through the forest at night. Some claim they saw a large figure watching from the tree before disappearing into the darkness. Today, many people compare these reports to Bigfoot sightings. The Appalachian region has become one of the most active areas in the United States for Bigfoot reports. Thousands of people have claimed to see a large, hair-covered creature moving through the forests across the country. And many of those reports come from remote mountain areas. Skeptics believe most sightings can be explained by misidentified animals, shadows, or mistaken identity. Believers argue that the vast wilderness of Appalachia still contains unexplored areas where an unknown species could potentially remain hidden. The question continues: are people seeing something real, or are they seeing what their minds expect to find in a dark forest? One of the most frightening types of stories from Appalachian folklore involves something even stranger than a creature. It involves something that sounds human. Many mountain legends warn about hearing voices in the woods that are not what they seem. A person walking alone hears someone calling for help. They hear a family member's voice. They hear their name being spoken. The natural reaction is to answer, to investigate, to help. But old stories warn against it. The belief is that something in the forest can imitate a human voice in order to lure people away from safety. Now, there is no scientific evidence that such beings exist. These stories are part of folklore, and many cultures around the world have similar legends about voices, spirits, and creatures that deceive travelers. What makes these stories interesting is how often they appear in different places and different times. The details change, the warning remains. Don't follow the voice. Another famous Appalachian legend is the Wendigo. The Wendigo comes from indigenous traditions, particularly among Appalachian-speaking peoples, and has been heavily adapted in modern horror stories. Traditional Wendigo beliefs are complex and vary between communities. They often involve themes of greed, hunger, and the consequences of losing one's humanity. Over time, popular culture transformed the Wendigo into a creature of the forest, a terrifying figure associated with winter, isolation, and the wilderness. While modern stories often place the Wendigo throughout all wooded areas, including Appalachia, it is important to recognize the original culture roots of the legend and not reduce it to just a monster story. If you guys want to know more about the Wendigo, I just did about 4 episodes ago, maybe farther than that. I have done a Wendigo podcast episode. It tells you all about the Wendigo. You should check it out. The reason it remains so popular in horror is because it represents one of humanity's oldest fears, being alone in the wilderness, discovering something worse than being lost. Perhaps the scariest part of Appalachian legends is that many of them aren't about monsters. They're about the feeling that the forest itself is aware of you. People describe walking through the trees and suddenly feeling like they have crossed into a place they shouldn't be. The temperature changes, the sounds disappear, the air feels different. They don't see anything. They don't hear anything. But every instinct tells them to leave. Some researchers believe this is a survival response. Humans evolved to recognize subtle changes in our environment. Our brains can detect things before we consciously understand them. Others believe those moments are something else entirely, a warning, a message, a sign that the forest is telling you to go. The Appalachian Mountains have survived for hundreds of millions of years. They have witnessed battles, settlements, storms, tragedies, and countless human stories. Maybe that's why people feel something different when they enter those woods. Maybe it's the age of the mountains. Maybe it's the isolation. Maybe it's simply our imagination. Or maybe there are still mysteries hiding beneath those ancient trees. As we close out our first journey into the Appalachian Mountains, remember this: the forest doesn't have to be haunted to be frightening. Sometimes the scariest thing about wilderness is knowing how little we truly understand about it. Because when the sun disappears behind the mountains, when the last bit of light fades between the trees, and you hear something moving somewhere in the darkness, you have to ask yourself one question: are you alone? This has been the Paranormal Inc. Ohio podcast, the new season of Haunted Forest. Join us next time as we travel to Massachusetts and enter one of America's strangest locations, the Freetown Fall River State Forest, where the legends of the Bridgewater Triangle come alive. I hope you guys enjoyed tonight's episode. Thank you so much for coming out and checking it out. I love each and every single one of you. Thank you so much for supporting. Please share us, comment everywhere. And you will hear from me in the next one. Bye, everyone.